Welcome to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My special guest today is award-winning artist, author, and editor, and well-known historian of the American West, especially Route 66, Jim Hinckley from Kingman, Arizona. Jim, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing today?
Really good. I'm not going to try to take anything away from Bob Bosbell as the artist of Route 66, but I will say, Jim, your knowledge and passion for the highway is artistry in work, and I don't think people can count how many people have been inspired to motor west and visit your adopted hometown of Kingman on their search for the heart of America. We owe you a great deal of thanks here in travel and tourism in Arizona and the West, and it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. With compliments like that, I'll need a bigger hat. It's a team effort. A lot of, Bob Bosbell, he provided some of the inspiration for me, and we just build on the shoulders of each other, and we keep, that's what we do.
Well, Jim, we recently had you here at Sharlot Hall Museum. We had a great presentation from you on the history of the Mother Road, and we know that right now things are getting really busy here in the centennial year of the U.S. highway system and of Route 66, and your schedule is pretty darn tight. So we appreciate you coming on the show right now. What is happening up in your world right now? Is there anything happening over the next 2 weeks up in Kingman and along Route 66 in Arizona?
There's always something happening on the main street of America. And the Centennial, well, that's kind of, giving it a kick in the pants. It's gotten even a little busier. But let's see, a couple of days ago, I had an Italian journalist, travel journalist here. I showed him around Kingman. Then I did the same day, I did a dinner for the Czechoslovakian Route 66 Association. And tonight I've got Lon Haldeman with PAC, a group that bicycles Route 66. And then next week, the 2nd of May, is the 37th annual Route 66 Fun Run, which is basically a 160-mile block party that rolls back the clock and turns Route 66 into what it was back about 1958.
And I know the Fun Run, there's an event I think I'm going to try to attend on April 30th, honoring Angel Delgadillo and Seligman. Is there a weekend? Are people starting to fill up along from Las Vegas to Flagstaff and Prescott, their hotel rooms for this big fun run?
Yeah, the fun run every year attracts about at least 800 entries and another 800 to 2,000 people that just tag along. It basically becomes a 160-mile block party. But this year it looks extraordinary. We've got a Japanese performer. I won't try to pronounce his name, but he is internationally known folk singer. He'll be here performing at the Beale Street Theater. I received a note this morning that the president of the Japanese Route 66 Association, Toshi Goto, and his wife will be here. Sam Murray has New Zealand-based Gilligan's Route 66 tours, and he's included the Fun Run in his spring tour this year. Gary from Texas Route 66 Association, he's bringing his family out. And I've heard from people as far away as Illinois that's on the road as we speak, headed for western Arizona.
Well, it sounds really remarkable and a very exciting opportunity for the world to, put the spotlight on northern Arizona and Kingman and Seligman and all the communities along Route 66 in Arizona, out this part of the western end of the highway, not the far end in Santa Monica, but, the heartbeat of America, still beats strong along Route 66. And you've been involved in promoting travel and tourism in the Kingman area and in northern Arizona for 4 decades. When did you start getting involved in its promotion?
Well, I started writing in 1990, but I got involved in the Route 66 Renaissance in the early 90s. In 1994, I was a co-founder of the Route 66 Association of Kingman, Arizona, with Scott Dutton. We started that organization, and so 30 years.
Well, and that comes to mind what we'll talk a little bit about in some of our further segments, but I actually drove on some of the last segments of Route 66, driving back and forth to college and work on the East Coast. I was raised in Los Angeles. Actually, I was born along Route 66 in Santa Monica, and traveling back and forth to college at Wake Forest. Williams and Shamrock were two of the last places where I had to get off of I-40 and drive through town there in the mid-1980s. When did they finally bypass Williams? Was it 85 or 87?
84, and then the highway was decertified in 1985.
Okay, so that makes sense. So the fall of 84 would have been maybe the last time that summer I would have driven on, I would not have bypassed Williams. And in Shamrock, I know when I first was driving across 40, I still had to get off the highway to go through Shamrock. It's quite a feat for the local citizens all across America. But I want to pose this question. Did the Route 66 movement to celebrate and save its heritage start here in Arizona? We'll take a break and come back and find out the answer to that from our special guest, Jim Hinckley, the recent author and editor of Route 66, 100 Years.
For over 45 years, Blind Brothers Arizona has been the heart of window style in Prescott. From blinds, shutters, drapes, they custom design and install with the expert precision. Tailored to you, whether for your home or office, trust the name locals rely on. Visit blindbrothersaz.com today or call 928-776-1845 for a free consultation. Blind Brothers Arizona, the original since 1979. Since 1995, Helkin & Horn Ad Agency has helped local businesses stand out and succeed. From print and radio to websites and social media, their talented team crafts your brand's message and offers a plan to get it out into the community. Want results backed by over 30 years of experience? Visit azadagency.com today. Helkin & Horn, where their slogan is Be Known.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum. My special guest today from Kingman, Arizona is Jim Hinckley, who just published a brand new book that you'll want in your Route 66 collection. It's called Route 66, 100 Years. And Jim, when did you start working on this beautiful coffee table book? It is gorgeous and just chock full with hundreds and hundreds of images.
I guess it could be said I started on that book about 1959. Because this book is a little bit different from anything I've done. It's actually a Route 66 anthology. And two things that make it unique. We started with the prehistory of Route 66, back 1830 with Senator Henry Clay and the American Plan. And we presented the future of Route 66, talking about the Electric Vehicle Museum and the international interest in Route 66. And the people who helped me on this project were good friends and associates, passionate people about Route 66. The chapter on the international fascination for the road was written by Dries Bessels, a founding member of the Dutch Route 66 Association.
Well, I love how you bring the big tent to to Route 66, which I think is one reason why it's such a thriving part of Americana, American tourism right now. And just before the break, we were going to talk about how Route 66 nostalgia and the making sure that one more great highway just wasn't bypassed by the interstates and left on the roadside dead. So where did that movement start? And can we credit Arizonans to leading this charge?
Well, I think an argument could easily be made for that. There were a lot of early pioneers in the Route 66 Renaissance movement, Jerry McClanahan out in Oklahoma and Bob Waldmeyer. But it was Angel Delgadillo and his family and some business owners in Seligman, Arizona that really got the ball rolling. They especially Angel. He saw, with the bypass of Route 66, he saw his hometown almost instantly start to wither on the vine. And he knew how important Route 66 was. He knew that people had memories on this road. He knew that Route 66 was the American experience made manifest. And he thought that the world would be interested in keeping this going, and he was right.
And anyone who's driven I-40 knows that that as you are motoring west across Arizona and you leave Flagstaff, Williams, Ash Fork, they're all right adjacent, very close to the interstate. But really, by the time you get to Seligman, you're really kind of, and that highway from Seligman, it still leads up to Havasupai, and the Wallapai Indian Reservation, and Hackberry, Valentine, the old Oxbow route of Route 66. Have you ever done any research on why Seligman got really kind of bumped right there? Is it geography? Was it the expense of how they engineered the new route of I-40?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. They try to draw a straight. The interstate highway just basically becomes a straight line. Instead of following the contours of the land, instead of following the old roads, the foundational Native American trade routes and the Beale Wagon Road, they made it more of a straight line. If communities got in the way, we bulldoze our way through, and if they're not in the way, we just leave them to wither up beside the road.
Right. And we are going to be celebrating, I believe, Mr. Delgadillo. Did he just celebrate his 99th or his 100th birthday?
99th birthday. He's probably the only one of us pioneers in this road renaissance that'll probably still be here for the bicentennial of Route 66. He just keeps going. He just keeps going.
Now, let's talk about him just a little bit, because I think he does deserve so much attention, and his family. Was he a barber by trade, but then don't they also own a pool halls or one of the great hamburger stands along Route 66 in Arizona?
Yeah, his whole family. Angel is one of the truly inspirational people you'll meet for many reasons. When you think you can't make a difference in your community or change the world, you look at Angel. Here's a small town barber, born in Seligman. He lives in the house that I understand that he was born in. His brother Juan established the Snowcap Drive-In there in Seligman back about 53. Angel's father came up from Mexico, had a pool hall and a barber shop. That's on the original alignment of Route 66. That building's been refurbished, and that's one of the things they'll be celebrating on April 30th. But Angel went to school for a barber in Pasadena at a school along Route 66, and his whole life is tied to this road.
I think it's just a remarkable story for Arizona and Seligman, and be able, someone like that who just saw an opportunity, seized the day, and just tirelessly for years and years trying to get people's attention on the importance of the communities that helped define America along Route 66, just like so many other small towns whose communities were defined a long time ago by being along a river or a trail, and then a overland road or the railroad, and then the U.S. highway system, which I think we need to spend a little bit of time on here in the next break. And so we're gonna pause here and thank our sponsors, and then come and talk about President Calvin Coolidge, the U.S. Highway Act, and why it's as important to America as Lincoln's Railroad Act of 1862. We'll be right back on Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum, talking about Route 66 with historian Jim Hinckley.
History matters. For nearly 100 years, the Sharlot Hall Museum has preserved our community's story. And over at Findlay Toyota, they believe in that same legacy of trust and reliability. That's why we're proud they support us here at the Sharlot Hall Museum. Just as Toyota has a long history of building vehicles you can depend on. Findlay is committed to our community's future. Go see their amazing selection of new and used Toyotas. Experience a legacy of quality for yourself. Findlay Toyota on Willow Creek Road in Prescott. At Foothills Bank, they're not just about banking. They're about people, community, and building futures. Whether you're managing personal finances, growing your business, planning for retirement, or buying your dream home, their friendly team is there to guide you every step of the way. Stop by your local Foothills Bank today. It's more than just banking. It's a partnership for success. Foothills Bank is a division of Glacier Bank, member FDIC.
Well, if you're looking for the store that has everything, Prescott True Value Hardware might be your answer. From having that part to fix that leaky faucet to decorating your garden with charm. You see, they have got it all, and a friendly face to match for over 30 years. They've proudly served Prescott, supporting neighbors like you and local non-profits along the way. So visit the town, the place. Visit Prescott True Value Hardware. They're more than just a hardware store. They're more indeed.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My special guest today is Jim Hinckley, who is published 23 books to date on Route 66, the Mother Road, travel in the West, a great expert on travel, the development of transportation across the West. I know he's a huge fan of classic cars and the development of the automobile trade and auto traffic and advertising across America, really a great friend of all historians here in Arizona and those who believe that travel and tourism and travel along the old roads in America, the blue highways, really brings you to America and takes you to the heart of our country. Jim, were you born in Kingman, Arizona, or did your parents find Kingman as a new place to raise a family?
No, I'm actually from North Carolina, but I've been out here so long. I'm one of the dry roasted nuts. I live here on purpose. No, my folks, the short version of my pa was Navy in World War II in the Pacific, and then Coast Guard. And the summer of '66, he'd had enough of water in general. I can't make this stuff up. I'm not that imaginative. He had a fascination with the romanticism of the West, like so many people of his generation. And he was sick of the water, so he folded a map of the Western United States and threw a dart. And here I am in Kingman, Arizona.
That's a great story. I don't know how many people you'll meet that their parents decided where they would move the family based on throwing a dart at a map. But Jim, you are an original, and that is one original story. And do you have that map still?
No, I don't. I was just a youngster, and he wasn't much for keeping things, but he was
determined
one for doing things. Well, he was one for doing his things his way. There was the right way, the wrong way, and his way.
Right. Well, and because of your father decided to make that move in 1966, do you remember traveling on Route 66 when you were a child?
Yeah, we made our first trip west in ¡59 from Norfolk, Virginia. I was a little too young on that trip, but by '66, of course, I was old enough. And as cue the Twilight Zone music, but not only did we move out here to Arizona, and I thought this was the place they warned me about in Sunday school, but he bought some property sight unseen outside of Kingman, which happened to be along the pre-1952 alignment of Route 66 going up to Oatman. So we built a little homestead out there literally along Route 66. There was no traffic at that time, so I learned to ride a bicycle on Route 66, and then we had to haul water. So I learned to drive trucks on Route 66. And then my first paying job was for Ed Edgerton up at Ed's Camp, an old roadside place along Route 66. So I would ride my bike or commandeer my dad's truck. And every year we'd make a trip east to see family in Alabama, Tennessee, and Michigan. And every year that trip would be all or part of Route 66. And then I had a short-lived career. I had a John Wayne period on ranches, rodeo. Most of that was along 66. And then, like you, going to school and having that blending of I-40, Route 66, I had a short-lived career as a truck driver running to Oklahoma City and Wichita. And it was still Route 66, but it was being replaced by I-40. So, I've got a long association with the road when it was the road.
Well, and were you living in North Carolina when your family decided to move to Mojave County?
No, but we were living in Port Huron, Michigan at that time.
Okay. Still, lots of rain, very green. So kind of the backside of the moon from the green rolling hills and forests of Michigan with 4 seasons and frozen ponds when ponds still froze. And in Mojave County, where the wind blows maybe more than in Wyoming and the trains never end. You must have said, where are we?
Well, yeah, it was, I spent a lot of my summers around folks' farms in Alabama and Tennessee, and we were living in Michigan. Like I say, when we moved out here to Kingman in the desert especially, I really thought this was the place they warned me about in Sunday school. Kingman was a very different town. It was still very much a Western community.
Miners, ranchers.
Route 66, a lot of ranching, and that sparked my John Wayne period.
Railroaders.
And out there, out in the desert where we moved, the folks out there really were some dry roasted nuts. Some of the strangest people I ever met in my life.
Well, we have to thank this experience that we're talking about to Cool Cal, President Calvin Coolidge, who on November 11th, 1926, signed the U.S. Highways Act into law, beginning something that was one of the greatest changes imposed across the country by the federal government since Abraham Lincoln's Railroad Act of 1862. And it really transformed America into a nation of paved national highways that had standards and really, I think, is the beginning of the end of passenger train traffic in the United States. And Kingman's a crossroads of all 3 major, or maybe 4 native trails, Beals Wagon Road, federal highway across Arizona, the Santa Fe Trail, and then the U.S. Highway, and today, of course, I-40. And as you have pointed out to me, it's also the route of our national national air routes. So you're there in Kingman at this crossroads of federalism, statehood, local history going back thousands of years. It's really, I think that's one of the very interesting things you talk about in your presentations is this crossroads of history. But this wasn't typical of President Coolidge, but it's pretty far-sighted of him, don't you think?
Yeah, it had to come about. It was an evolutionary process, just like with the interstate highway and anything else. There's a societal advancements. We needed a highway system. But when the highway system was first created, it was really more highway system in name only. It was still rural areas were pretty rough, pretty rugged. Route 66 wasn't fully paved until 1938 out here by Valentine, Arizona.
That's a long time.
And and my pa said it was better to fill your head with useless knowledge than no knowledge at all. But one of the last U.S. highways to be paved was U.S. 6 up near the Nevada-Utah line. It would be 1952 before that highway was fully paved.
And there's one in Arizona that took a long time to be paved. The one that paved, that's the one that Tom Mix died on. that highway south of Florence. It was still unpaved when he died in 1941. I think it was still a few years, maybe even after World War II, before it was paved. That last section was paved down there. And it's interesting you mentioned US 6, because US 6 was one of the first national roads, and I lived in Iowa City for 9 years. US 6 parallels the Transcontinental Highway across Iowa. It was a very important road in that part of the country. And I think that you bring up something that's very interesting, is that many of the U.S. highways parallel and followed the important routes of commerce that connected America's small towns from coast to coast, which is one of the things that defines life along Route 66.
Yeah, Route 66, and Kingman's a microcosm of this. It's because we're at crossroads of the past, the present, and even the future, as we have an electric vehicle museum being established here along Route 66. And Route 66, it's the people. It always has been the people. That's what gives it the infectious magic, the enthusiasm. But Route 66, one of the things that makes it truly unique as far as the story of American highways, it is the American story made manifest. Our entire history is encapsulated in this road. The good, the bad, the ugly, the inspirational, the controversial, it's all encapsulated in this road. And that's something that makes it rather unique. You mentioned the trail history out here. We had that Native American trade route across here, and that was followed by the Spanish and chronicled by Father Garces in 1776. You had Francois Javier Aubry that basically followed that route. Then the Americans, you mentioned the Beale Road with his camel caravan. That was the first federally funded road in the Southwest. And then that was followed, of course, by the railroad. Then we had the National Trails Road through here, then Route 66, Highway 466, then I-40, and now I-11. The aeronautical history. We had the first airfield here in 1919. And then TAT, Transcontinental Air Transport, Charles Lindbergh was involved with first successful passenger air service coast to coast. They had a terminal in Kingman. The building's still here. And then we had World War II, the Kingman Army Airfield here in Kingman as well.
B-17s as far as you could see.
After the war, it became the largest concentration of military aircraft in the world, stockpiled along Route 66.
Well, we'll have to have another. I'm going to have you schedule you on the show for a future conversation about the importance of air travel and Arizona's influence on transcontinental air travel. But let's take a quick break here, and we're going to come back and talk about the Route 66 Centennial and how people can get involved in an upcoming exhibit here at Sharlot Hall Museum, and exhibits people can see on Route 66 in northern Arizona as well. We'll be right back with my special guest, Jim Hinckley, who is the editor of Route 66, 100 Years, and one of the world's experts on the Mother Road.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Jim. And I've had a number of opportunities. My name is Stan Houston, by the way, and I'm the leader of the Cowboy Spirit Storytelling Company, a kind of a radio and publishing company. And whenever I've had the opportunity to visit Jim Hinckley, I always remember my favorite saying: you'll learn more here by accident than most places by design. Well, you put Stuart and Jim together, and it's entertainment, education, and a good time learning new things. And thank you much, and we're going to learn even more in the final sector. That'll probably be one of the best of all. Hey, by the way, let me remind you of some of the opportunities at the Sharlot Hall Museum. First of all, just remind you that many places in this tourist world, you go to the gift shop and it's kind of kitsch and swag. No, Charlotte's Cellar is a first-rate gift shop. Good gifts, good things to learn, to share, to teach others. It truly is an adventure in good taste and good merchandise. So make sure you visit Charlotte's cellar. And remember, the upcoming Terry Moore photo exhibit at Route 60 on Route 66, just about at Route 66, and the American Heritage Day on Friday, the 3rd of July. So go to charlottehallmuseum.org, charlottehallmuseum.org, and look at all of the events and all of the opportunities. Have your date book with you, your calendar with you, so you can make sure that you're going to make your appearance. You're going to get on the road and go to Prescott, Arizona, and visit the Sharlot Hall Museum. Well, let's go back to the museum and the boys of Route 66. They're going to finish the story for today.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My special guest today is Jim Hinckley. He is talking with us from Kingman, Arizona today, which is at the ground zero of many of the Route 66 centennial celebrations this coming May through November, and hopefully the celebrations will continue on for another year as we honor the beginning of the Mother Road and the importance of it culturally and historically to the United States as well as the world. And recently, Jim gave a lecture here at Sharlot Hall, one of our Route 66 events at Sharlot Hall Museum, and mentioned the fact that in the 1960s and 70s, during the height of the Cold War, Route 66 was making a difference for people behind the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, Route 66, there's so many things that are hard to describe with 66. Here we are talking about a road. It's a road, for God's sakes, and officially it doesn't even exist. And yet this road has an international fan club. There are Route 66 associations in Czechia, in Germany, in the Netherlands, Canada, Japan, tour companies that specialize in Route 66 tours based in Australia, New Zealand, Germany. It's amazing that this road has that. And it's because early marketing campaigns branded this as the main street of America. And Route 66, from its inception, has always had the best press and publicity. And so it's morphed into kind of a linear attraction, America's longest small town, if you will. And it's come to symbolize the quintessential American experience, the ultimate American road trip. Places like Dutton Motors here in Kingman, which is also the family, the Dunton family, is celebrating 100 years of business along Route 66 in western Arizona. These kind of stories. But, you know, it's hard for me to grasp this international obsession with Route 66.
Now,
And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you had mentioned to us a story of a Czechoslovakian who would listen to, the American propaganda radio stations and would hear the song Route 66. And
yes. I was in Czechia at the second European Route 66 festival. And I had a fellow tell me about growing up behind the Iron Curtain and listening to that song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66 on Radio Free America. And then he'd watch bootleg copies of Easy Rider that were filmed on Route 66. And it was really moving. He said in his broken English that Route 66 came to symbolize for his generation the freedom that the Statue of Liberty had represented for a previous generation.
I think that's just remarkable, and it's the power, the iconic nature of Route 66, which is going to be celebrated in all ways, A to Z, this summer across America, from Illinois to Santa Monica, and I'm sure across the world in Route 66 clubs, they're going to be raising a glass to the Mother Road over in their own celebrations. But Jim, you have some very effective websites and are involved in promoting travel and tourism in northern Arizona and across the Grand Canyon State and the region. Tell us a little bit about your website and some websites where people can go right now to start planning their Route 66 adventures this summer.
Well, JimHinkley'sAmerica.com. I showcase my greatest talent, which is telling people where to go. I've got lots of information there. The Historic Route 66 Association of Arizona is just filled with all kinds of information. Journalist Roger Naylor has a tremendous website and a new book about Route 66 in Arizona. These are all great places that you can learn about traveling Route 66, making plans to travel Route 66 in Arizona. You can learn about events. The Route 66 navigation app has an events calendar. That's also a great source of information.
Well, those are all really great tips. And from your involvement, I know the last couple of years you've gone to some conferences have you been out to, were you in Tulsa just a couple of years ago for a big planning meeting on Route 66?
Yes, I speak most every year at the Route 66 Miles of Possibility Conference in Illinois. Great event. You want an excuse for a Route 66 road trip? The AAA Route 66 Road Fest in Tulsa takes place at the end of June, and that is just an absolutely spectacular event. And it's not just spectacular because I'm going to be speaking there. It's because it is a tremendous event about cars, Route 66, the Route 66 culture. Great people like Michael Wallace, the author and the voice of the sheriff in the movie Cars. And even better, this whole event with 200 plus car show, travel trailers, vintage displays, it's all air conditioned and indoors.
Well, I can't wait to get out do a little Route 66 myself this summer. For people who have a good idea of the route of Route 66 or don't, let's remind them that great song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66, recounts the fact that the road itself starts in Chicago. And what states does it hit on its route to the ocean in Santa Monica?
Well, it runs from Chicago down to East St. Louis, crosses the river into St. Louis, Missouri, continues over to Joplin, Missouri, and then into Kansas. Kansas is it only has 13 and a half miles, but you don't want to miss that. Then it's across to Oklahoma, then across the Texas Panhandle. New Mexico, things start to get really complicated because you have to ask yourself, which Route 66? Pre-1937, Route 66 made a big loop from Santa Rosa up through Santa Fe and down to Albuquerque.
Right.
After 37, it was a straight run. Then we get into Arizona, and in western Arizona, again, you have two choices. To me, there's only one choice. But in western Arizona, west of Kingman, the pre-52 alignment runs up through the Black Mountains on a road that was cut in 1921. You'll find the steepest grades, the sharpest curves, the most spectacular views anywhere on Route 66. A one-eyed blind man will not take a bad photograph. And the post-52 alignment is basically I-40 through Yucca. Mm-hmm. And then Route 66 crosses the Mojave Desert in California. That's a little problematic because a lot of the road is closed in the Mojave Desert because the bridges are out or being replaced. But then you get into,
keep going.
Yes. I was going to say, in Los Angeles, people complain about the traffic, the stoplights. Well, they were complaining about that in 1940. That's just the Route 66 experience. The original western terminus is downtown Los Angeles in the historic theater district. Highly recommend that. And then after 37, they moved it out to Santa Monica. Not the pier, but you can see it from there. So you might as well continue to get to the ocean.
Yeah, I love the way you recount that. And I was going to make just a little note that anyone who's out there for an adventure, and our good friend Bob Bosbell, who used to work at his father's gas station, the Flying A, Al Bell's Flying A in Kingman, Bob has told a story that many traveler west with their inner tubes ready for the ocean tied to the top of their car would ask him, how close are we to California? And Bob would tell them, you're about an hour away. And they just thought that was wonderful, but not realizing that one of the longest stretches of desert that any traveler will have to cross. And there's a sign out there just past Needles that says something to the effect of no services 75 miles. And if you're actually going to get off the road and travel some of Old Route 66, you better be traveling with somebody else and have plenty of water. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's bad. You always, anytime you desert travel, carry water. It doesn't matter if your car is new or if it's a Model T Ford, carry water. If you don't need it, you might find somebody that does.
Yeah, that's right.
And make sure you got gas, a little common sense. The desert's not to be feared, but you got to have some common sense.
Right, and places like Kingman, anyone who's intrigued about traveling across Route 66, if I drive into Kingman and where do I stop in to say, hey, I'm interested in going on a 66 adventure today? Is it the Powerhouse? Where do I stop to learn more about road conditions, where to stay? There's a lot of people who are like, let's go do that. But, they need to stop somewhere and actually ask, hey, what's happening? Is the road out? Is the road good? Is the places to stay? And pay attention to the weather. I'm a big promoter of that when you're going to travel. The summer's here. You can be surprised by the monsoon rains, but you can also be surprised by, the quick changes of season here in Arizona and the heat as well.
Yes. Anybody that doesn't think we don't have seasons in Arizona, they haven't lived here for a week.
Right.
The Powerhouse Visitor Center in Kingman's a great place to get directions and information. There's a great Facebook group called Historic Route 66 with well over 300,000 members that answer questions, ask questions, and help people plan trips. Again, the Route 66 navigation app. I highly recommend getting a copy of Jerry McClanahan's Easy 66 Guide. Not only is that a great throwback, but it's a fun book to travel with, hand-drawn maps, information. Jerry also has a companion website, and he provides continuous updates on road closures, road construction, changes to the road, and he even includes his own. He's even crazy enough to include his cell number and his address.
How about
so
that?
If you're in Oklahoma, you can get it signed.
I'm going to have to get one of those. I'll tell you that. Speaking of Route 66, it's attracted artists, musicians, authors from John Steinbeck to you said Roger Naylor, yourself, Bob Bosbell, and a good friend of ours that we both know pretty well, Terrence Moore of Tucson, Arizona. Mm-hmm. And here at Sharlot Hall Museum, in our gift shop, we have a very good selection of Jim's books, T-shirts, Route 66 memorabilia, because we sit on 89, US 89. It's now State Arizona 89, but 89 was a U.S. highway that connected Prescott as kind of a hub city to US 60 and Route 66. And Terry Moore is going to have a show here starting here at Sharlot Hall Museum on May 12th, based on his book, 66 from 66. And it's really going to be a great show. And Jim, I hope that when we do an evening honoring Terry, that you will be available to come down and celebrate this really special show of a man who's dedicated well over 40 years to photo. I think it's probably back into the 70s, over 50 years of taking photos along Old Route 66. And I hope that you can come down and be part of the show.
Well, I would be honored. That would be a great thing to do.
Yeah, we're really hoping to celebrate Route 66 here in Prescott. We have an event. I know a Car Club 66 event here at the museum October 16th. And Prescott's been on the highway, an important city for travelers going to and from across Arizona, and its connection to Route 66 and our communities in Yavapai County like Chino Valley and Paulden and Ash Fork and Seligman. And so we are really looking forward to celebrating the history and heritage of Route 66 here in Yavapai County as well. And I know that as we have a special exhibit that's going to come up this summer, it's also going to touch on the importance of transportation in the West and in Arizona and in Prescott. And I think that that's still the heartbeat of America, that whether you're traveling for business, you're an international tourist, and the there's just the romance of getting out on the open road and being able to see for hundreds of miles in all directions. And you can really do that on Route 66.
The whole thing with the Route 66 is, of course, best, but any two-lane highway, if you're open-minded, don't overplan, do plan a bit, but get out. That's the best way you can discover America. I mean, really discover America. You'll find out we have more in common than divides us. And you'll find the most amazing stories, the most inspirational people. And, like my pa said, fill the head with useless knowledge. There's endless opportunity for that when you're out on the open road.
I believe that. I always told my kids, you're going to see America from the ground up when we leave the interstate and get out on those two-lane blue highways, and America's into the heart of America. Well, Jim, this has been great having you on Arizona Roundup this week. Jim Hinckley, the editor of Route 66 100 Years. Repeat your website for everyone, please, Jim.
Real easy, JimHinckleysAmerica.com.
All right, check it out, everybody. And to learn more about what's happening at Sharlot Hall Museum, go to charlottehallmuseum.org. I'm Stuart Rosebrook at Arizona Roundup in Prescott, Arizona.